Welcome, and thank you for listening to this interview on RPGamer.com. My name is Juwan Corbett, and today we'll be interviewing Craig Ritchie, the founder and studio head of Drop Bear Bytes, and the solo developer of the game Broken Roads, released on April 10th, 2024. Broken Roads is a CRPG set in the post-apocalyptic Australia, where players will use their wits, strategies, and philosophical understanding to engage with communities across the continent. The game is available on Steam, Nintendo Switch, Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 4, and PlayStation 5. If you would like to keep up with news, interviews, and other gaming media, please check our website, rpgamer.com, and connect with us via our Discord or our forums. Thank you for listening, and on to the interview. Thank you, Craig. Okay, so, first things first, I would like to get to know about you yourself, so can you just introduce yourself for everybody?
Sure, I'm Craig Ritchie. I'm the founder and game director at Drop Bear Bytes. We released our first game, Broken Roads, about a year ago, coming up to the 1 year anniversary. And yeah, as we will get into in this conversation, I'm now working alone on the project.
Yeah, we will. Can you just tell us a bit of your history in the video game industry? You know, like what inspired you to be a game developer? How'd you start? That whole thing.
Sure. So, I was always into games, playing games as a kid, the arcade machines at the cafe around the corner from the house. And we had an Atari. I don't even remember exactly which one, how far back that goes, but the old black and white with the little racing cars and the, giant square pixels. And eventually we got a ZX Spectrum, and just always was like fascinated by games growing up. I got into the writing side before I got into game development, and I was doing games journalism, and that sort of turned into some marketing roles. And then I got hired by CCP Games maybe about 12, 13 years ago. It was my first actual job directly in the games industry. I was with NVIDIA doing digital marketing for them just prior, and did quite a bit of the GeForce stuff, so that was sort of games industry adjacent. And then about 8 years ago, my wife and I moved to Australia. And I was doing some marketing consultancy and helping out with some, in the video games industry as well. And then at the start of 2019, after speaking to somebody I used to work with at the end of one of my marketing roles, he said, "Hey, why don't you, it's the start of a new year. Why don't you try do your own thing? You've got a lot of experience from a bunch of different studios and so on. Why don't you consider starting your own company and making your own game?" And yeah, January 2019, founded Drop Bear Bytes, and here we find ourselves some 6 years later.
Okay, cool. So I had a few little sub questions there. First off, I've never heard of you said the ZAX?
Oh, the ZX Spectrum.
ZX Spectrum. Where is that
Yeah.
from? What is that from? I've never heard of
So
that
that was
console.
a very old 8-bit. It's a British. Well, it was a computer. It was basically like a keyboard that had
Mm-hmm.
all of the components within it, and you would plug in a tape recorder, and then you'd also plug the keyboard directly into the TV. And there were a few expansions and joysticks and things you could get, but most of the time it was plug in the tape recorder, press play, load the game, wait for it to read off the tape, and then you would control the game, with the rubber keys. There was actually a documentary recently called, I believe it's called The Rubber Keyed Wonder, which is about the ZX Spectrum. And yeah, it was
Mm-hmm.
really big in Europe. And I, grew up in South Africa. We didn't have nearly as many, as much technology. We had the sanctions. We had a lot of products that didn't make it into South Africa. So I think I knew like one or two people who had a Commodore 64, but there wasn't actually a presence for that. But you could buy the ZX Spectrum, so that had a much larger presence. But very, very big in the UK in the 80s, the ZX Spectrum.
Okay, I understand. And it's so funny, side note. I understood why your accent sounded so like normal
Mm,
to me because my wife is South African. So
right.
I got married there, and so and some of her friends and other people are South
Right.
African, as well. So it's so
Right.
that little thing is
True.
like,
Yeah.
oh, okay, I hear it. Smallest world.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So, moving on, you said that you started working on the game back in 2019, or you started Drop Bear Bites back in
Yeah.
2019, and now
Yeah.
we are 6 years later. We're a year post release of Broken Roads. Just on some basic preamble about Broken Roads, what made you choose a CRPG as the genre for your first game versus like something else? You know?
Sure. Look, that's my absolute favorite genre and always has been. I mean, if you could see the shelves behind me, I've got most of the gold box games. I've got the old Ultima games. I've got all those classic titles that I've, sometimes hung on to the boxes since the early 90s. Um, I had played, every kind of game that you could because you'd get like the magazines at the time would come with a tape on the cover and you'd get all these demos. So you'd wait for a new, like, whatever it was called, Your Sinclair, I think was the magazine, and there'd be a tape on the cover and you'd get like 6 or 8 demos. You could play all the different genres and try everything. um, and it was when I first experienced, I think it was King's Quest 2 was the first Sierra game I ever played. And it was like nothing that I'd ever experienced before in the arcades or on the ZX Spectrum or on some of the games that at the time, we had like an old XT, it was an IBM compatible with two 360 kilobyte floppy drives. And, the games were, for the most part, absolutely rubbish. The ones that had the most depth were the text adventures. We had I played The Hobbit on ZX Spectrum, and then I don't
Mm,
even remember what the name of it was. Sphinx Adventure on the Acorn Electron, and then a few others like it wasn't Colossal Cave, but it these texts, get lamp, go north, whatever. Then I played King's Quest 2 and was like, oh my goodness, I'm watching this character carrying all my items in my inventory. I can walk anywhere in the screen, I can say and do whatever. I'm not just running left to right, hitting question marks and getting mushrooms and growing and shooting things. I have complete
yeah.
freedom here to explore this world, which was amazing. And then a couple years later, I got Rogue. Now, back then it was the ASCII art Rogue, and it was absolutely amazing. Having these games where you had this role-playing element just totally blew me away. But then the massive, quite seriously life-changing moment was when I first played Ultima 6. It had depth of writing, multiple characters, level up. It had all of these heavily philosophical themes going on, and yeah, I mean, I'm still amazed by that game now. It's still the most influential game for me ever. It sparked at, I don't know how old I was, 15, 16, sparked a
Mm.
lifelong interest in philosophy. I was like buying and reading philosophy books as a teenager and went on to study philosophy at university as well. And I can directly trace it back to that game and what it, had about all the virtues and so forth. And it showed a depth of narrative, of character development, of ideas, of themes that I had, you know, never
Never
seen before.
experienced.
No, never experienced, and it took what I'd enjoyed about like reading fantasy and science fiction and so forth in a novel, short story format. It took that into an interactive medium. You could explore an absolutely massive world. Fast forward about 8 or 9 years, and I played Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. Baldur's Gate 2 still being, I believe, the greatest game ever made. More recently, Pillars of Eternity 2. And it's just like this. That's the genre I love. I've played most of the definitive games in that, of that genre. And not to mention Fallout 1 and 2, which were just phenomenal. So I was like, yep,
Hmm.
that's kind of what I what just gravitated towards making. So it was a long weaving story of getting from simple games to do slightly more in-depth games to like, oh my goodness, the this genre is like there's so
This is an
much depth when
amazing
you role
thing.
playing. Yeah, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I get it, and it's interesting you say all of that because I have the experience with that as well. I also thoroughly enjoy CRPGs. It's one of my favorite genres too.
Yep.
Um, I know, like I started off with, like you mentioned, you gotta jokingly mention Mario, but mine was Spyro the Dragon when I was like
Sure. Sure.
7 or something. And then from there, I think one of my first CRPGs was playing. What was it? It was Knights of the Old Republic 1.
Okay.
And I replayed that game
Yeah.
every time. I did Dark Side playthrough, Light
Mhm.
Side playthrough, Gray Jedi.
Mhm.
I was engaged. I always liked Star Wars as a kid. I mean, it makes
Yeah.
sense. It's a kid's genre, but or it's a kid's, it's made for kids. But
Mhm.
that game really drove me into it, and some of the and now I've played more of the modern. I never really went back and played a lot of the classics outside of I think Fallout 1 and 2,
Mhm.
but the modern or maybe like contemporary, big hitters of the genre. So stuff like Wrath of the Righteous, like
Yeah.
Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous and Pillars of Eternity 1 and 2 and Wasteland and stuff.
Mhm.
Those ones that started making their comeback. So I definitely get the love of of freedom of choice that genre offers, especially when you're just playing RPGs. I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, so it's easy to sit there and keep going on and on with it
Oh, you're gonna
after
have
you.
to repeat that because the audio is doing its thing again. You definitely get that genre. What?
Oh, I get the love of the genre
Hmm.
where it's just like you feel as though you're getting so much from like reading and
Yeah.
learning and storytelling.
Yeah.
It's a genre that's kind of like unmatched from a Western RPG perspective,
Yeah.
and
No,
I thoroughly enjoy it too.
fully agree. If you haven't played Planescape Torment Enhanced Edition, I would highly recommend it.
Even to this day.
100%. Well, the Enhanced Edition was released, what, a few years ago. It adds all the quality of life features. I think it's the best writing in any video game ever. A lot of people say it was surpassed by Disco Elysium. I'm, in disagreement there. I think that what Planescape did and did first was continues to be absolutely phenomenal. And if you've handled Fallout 1 and 2, Planescape was a few years later, and the enhanced editions that Beamdog put out, I don't recall when exactly in the last 10 years or so, but highly, highly recommend. It's before Disco Elysium came out and holds the spot of greatest RPG of all time. Most people consider Planescape Torment, or at least in my experience, I have seen most people considering Planescape Torment to be the best writing in a Western RPG of all time. So I'd highly, highly recommend that you give Planescape Torment Enhanced Edition a look. It's often discounted now on Steam or GOG, and a truly excellent game.
Okay, I'm. You know what? I always throw things back on my wish list. I have a huge backlog, so
Hmm. Yeah,
it'll
we all do
join.
these days. Absolutely.
It'll join the pantheon of many RPGs I need to get into to do multiple to try and do a second playthrough of, or even a
Did you
first
play
one.
it? Did you play So you haven't played Planescape Torment yet?
Not yet. I played
Okay.
Torment: Tides of Numenera for a little
Yep.
bit. That was the
Yep.
spiritual successor to
Yep.
Planescape Torment,
Yeah. Yeah.
but the original I have not.
Cool. Well worth um giving it a go. Still excellent.
Oh, oh, thank you for that.
No worries.
Here, let's go on. So, tell me about the release. Let's go back to your CRPG. So, tell me about the release of Broken Roads. Like, what was that? What was that like for you around the time? I was actually follow. I'll give you a bit of preamble there. That I was following the game for a few months before release. I remember the original release date was around November of 2023,
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
So
Correct.
But tell me when you finally did, and I and oof, brain farted.
Mhm.
When you did release in April, I believe, right?
Yeah.
How was that for yourself as on day of release and the feedback that you received? How was that for you?
Um, well, it was like living some kind of surreal waking nightmare to see 5 years of effort being very, very harshly criticized. Often in some ways that, despite how close I am, despite my bias, despite everything, there was a level of, some of them were just plain cruel. It was very strange to see some of the big outlets not just slightly disappointed or okay, it didn't live up to the hype or whatever, but I mean, one of the you could just have to have a look at some of the worst reviews, but some of them were just, it was unreal to read that what I thought, look, there's bugs, there are definitely narrative shortcomings. I'm definitely going to have to offer a lot of post-launch support to this game. I believe that I'm what I want. Everyone wants to release an 80%, 90%, 9 out of 10 game. You want to release something amazing. I thought, look, I'm trying to be objective about this, and with the early feedback and so forth, I think we're probably looking at like a 6.5 out of 10 launch that I can improve. So to see, how obliterated we were by IGN, to see how Eurogamer and Rock Paper Shotgun, if you read those articles, there's like an element of cruel, sometimes almost ridicule. I would advise you to have a look at them if you want to see what I'm talking about. That extends beyond a review of the product at hand and almost an assessment of what it isn't, because we never came out of the shadow of Disco Elysium. That seems to have been this black cloud that has hung over this game. And I just could not understand, no matter how many times we'd explained to people, this was not influenced by Disco Elysium. We did not make this game because we saw Disco Elysium and wanted to create something like that. We had released our trailer. We'd been working on the game for about 10 months. We'd actually had hands-on demos at PAX Australia before Disco came out. And so many reviewers were like, if you're going to try and copy Disco Elysium, it doesn't hold a candle to the game. It so unashamedly copies. I can't remember, but it was just like, what's going on here? You know,
I get that.
um, there were a couple of very fair reviews. Game Fiend and PC Gamer, like Game Fiend gave us a 6 out of 10, and it was the most, I would say, fair, objective critique of everything that was wrong with Broken Roads and why it was such a disappointment and so on. And they gave us a 6 out of 10. I think PC Gamer gave us 64, which was bang on where I was estimating. I was like, yep, we're going to get a 6.5. We also had some major issues with the Chinese and Russian localization that led to, along with the flaws in the game, a lot of downvotes on Steam that made it really hard to get over the
Hmm.
initial sort of negative and mixed reviews. And then, yeah, like seeing something like IGN give us a 4 out of 10, and in the same week, IGN Italy, who played the exact same version of the game, and there isn't Italian localization, so they likely played it in English or one of the other European languages. I think they gave us a 7 or a 7.5. So that kind of thing's just really confusing. It doesn't make sense. When you
Mm.
Google the game, I think IGN's just, they've nailed their SEO, so you'll just see Broken Roads 4 out of 10. And yeah, it was something that we just couldn't, we still haven't recovered from. The sales were terrible. And obviously the mixed reviews on Steam really hurt when somebody, oh, it's 50% off now on sale, let's go have a look. Oh, this game's still mixed. It's got a small number of reviews. Oh, it clearly didn't live up to its hype. And it's, yeah, the definition of mixed. because you'll see one Australian reviewer, I think it was RPG site. She said she gave it a 3 out of 10 and said, sadly, the game isn't worth a damn, you know. And exactly the same week, somebody from other Australian outlets like, yeah, this is an 8 out of 10 game, and I think an Xbox site gave us a 9 out of 10, and it just seems to be an incredibly divisive title where if you wanted the next Disco Elysium, which we've literally never ever said we were going to be, you will be extremely disappointed. If you follow the lineage back to like Ultima and early Fallout and Baldur's Gate, you might see that that's more what we were going for. But yeah, it was like I said, it was like the surreal thing of I worked for 5 years and we built up this team and we were also dedicated and passionate, and it's not just not as good as we thought, but it is getting cruelly, yeah, demolished by some of the
Almost
larger
bullied.
outlets. I mean, I don't want to say that. I don't know. I don't know what motivated some of the articles. Like, if you look at the comments on some of the articles where readers are going, I think it was Rock Paper Shotgun. Like, what is this? This isn't even a review. This is more just the writer wanted to say a few things, and it was really, really strange for me, especially having been a games journalist for like 15 years or whatever, to see you're not discussing the game here. You're discussing some kind of meta, like, um, you're discussing your subjective experience and your disappointment. This article is more about you and how you dislike it than an objective like reading, which is why the Game Fiend and PC Game and some of the others, where I was like, yep, cool, it deserves a 6. You're right. I'm going to keep working, and I'm going to keep improving. So no, I don't want to say it was bullying or cruel, although other people have come to me, people completely unrelated to the company, unrelated to the project, and said, I don't understand some of these reviews. They use the word cruel. So yeah, I'm not going to try and look for pity and whatever. The game should have been better. There should have been less bugs. Some of the narrative I can now see, having removed myself from the project as in, I stepped out of being so deep in Broken Roads for a few months, working on, our next unannounced title and so on, so that I could just come back to it with fresh eyes and going, yep, like when you're so close to something, you don't see the flaws. And now I do. So this was about 6 months ago or so that I came back. I worked intensely on Broken Roads immediately after launch. Then for about 2 to 3 months, there was just a little bit of support while we worked on our very next big patch for Broken Roads. And people were very happy with that patch, but it became incredibly clear they wanted more small patches more rapidly, which is exactly what I have been doing. And again, just going by the numbers, if you look at our launch, the first 6 weeks of the game, I think we had like a 42 or 43% positive on Steam, as in 43% of people recommended the game and 57 didn't. That was from launch until, like, I don't know, at some point in late May. But if you take from late May, when we did one of our first big updates, until the patch that we released in, I think it was January this year, it's 70% positive on Steam, which is a massive turnaround. But the volume of reviews, the average has gone from like 43 to, I think it's like 52 or whatever it is right now. But we still have not managed to climb out of that valley of mixed, which, I don't expect people to go to the page, change the date of the reviews, look at, like, you can't expect a consumer to do that. But yep, they land on the
Yeah.
page, see mixed, move on. And we probably still need like another 100 or, in the low 100 positive reviews to move us out of that mixed into mostly positive. Because if you have 69.8% positive on Steam, you're still regarded as mixed. You have to be 70 or higher. So yeah, it was, to circle back to the original question, it was unreal. The team I think a lot of people were absolutely devastated. It was really good to see even some of the most harsh reviews still praise the art, and I'm extremely proud of what the art team accomplished. The music was pretty much universally praised as well. The writing and some of the characters were really loved, and others not so much. And a lot of people
Mm.
liked the idea of the moral compass or how it was implemented in some places, and then horribly underutilized in others. And of course, the extremely buggy state of the game. Let's
Mm.
say we have 20 QA people playing the game back to front many times in the run up to launch. You then release, hundreds of codes to journalists and thousands of players in the wild. They're going to find combinations of, quest variables and ways of getting through the game that's like, okay, in our hundreds of hours, or probably thousands by launch of hours of testing, nobody had done that exact sequence, and it leads to a complete progression blocker that we then have to hotfix out. So yeah, it was by no, you know, it was a failed launch. It was a commercial failure at launch, but it is massively improved, and it fell so far short of my original vision at launch, and
Mm.
I've been continually working on it. And you don't have such a bad launch in a year like 2024 where studios are shutting down and redundancies are like every week there's two more studios that have let their whole team go. You can't have a failed launch in a year like that and expect to keep your team together. So very sadly, we made some redundancies. We could not renew certain contracts. We managed to keep a few people on for a little bit longer, but we said goodbye to our last employee about 6 weeks ago, and I persist as the only person in the company now. So yeah, that's it. Extremely disappointing, devastating, and heavily impactful launch, where I do question how one reviewer gives it a 4, another reviewer from the same outlet gives it a 7.5, how somebody gives it a 3, and somebody else, playing the exact same version of the game could give it an 8 or a 9. Um, I've never seen I've never seen more mixed reviews than that.
Yeah, that's very usually, it's I understand what you mean because like in my time nowadays, even with that, even like a few games that I've played with other reviewers on RPGamer that we've talked about, I enjoyed one, he didn't enjoy it as much. We both kind of had this middling opinion about the same game as
The audio cut
well.
out. You said other reviews on RPGamer that we've talked about. What did you say after that?
Oh, we've talked about some games. I've talked about some games with other reviewers on RPGamer, and it's very much normally if I say it's about a 7, they'd say if they didn't like it, they could say it's like a 5, but the
Yeah,
numbers wouldn't be so drastic. So that
yeah,
I understand where the confusion is. It's like I have had no experience with someone where I've said this is a 2 out of 10, straight up, guys, it's a 2 out of 10, and then someone else could say, nah, come on, it's like actually like an 8. An
yeah,
8? That's a big
yeah,
jump.
yeah. Totally, totally.
And so,
There absolutely seems to have been a massive, massive gap between expectation and delivery. Also, hey, there was a thing when the review copies went out in November, and then the reviewers started finding bugs that the QA team had not, and we started fixing it, and they experienced a lot of issues, and it was clear that the game needed more time. One very prominent journalist tweeted about how infuriated he was that he'd spent so much time reviewing a game that had then basically been delayed while they've already put the time in. And then another, I think it was an editor from Kotaku said, "Oh, if that happened to me, I would just give them the negative score anyway." The original tweet was deleted. The other one persisted, and I think the person who did the original tweet gave us a 4 or a 5 when the game did launch. Um, doesn't prove anything, but there is absolutely. I don't think that it had zero effect. Like the fact that we definitely pissed off some journalists who had played the game, and then I don't know how many hours they'd sunk, and then the publisher was like, "No, this game clearly needs more time. We're delaying it for 3, 4 months." I and the fact that people went on Twitter to moan about it and then realized perhaps that's not a good idea and deleted their tweets. Um, I find it hard to believe that that had a zero impact on when the actual launch came out.
I, and we can only speculate.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because we can't really know. I
Exactly.
won't lie to you. I'm not. In my own head, I can see where that logic comes in because
Hmm.
especially when you're doing like reviews for websites that are in the embargoes are coming up and everything. I
Yep.
can see where that frustration can come from on their
But
side, but at the same
absolutely.
time, it's still you should still give the game a new, a fresh look. Maybe even
Hmm.
like compare and contrast. That way, you can really come with two different scores and then say, okay, well, I would have given this a 4 like 3 months ago. Now I'd give
Hmm.
it like a 6. So I guess in the middle there would be a 5. That
Yeah.
would make, in my head, that makes more sense. So it's
Sure.
like, okay,
Sure. Sure.
but
Look, again, you can only speculate, but none of it does you any good. You get the reputation of being an extremely buggy game. I mean, we have fixed hundreds and hundreds of bugs, literally hundreds of bugs since launch.
mm-hmm,
But again, the way Steam works is like the most helpful reviews of whatever period that that the viewer is looking at the Steam page will be the first thing that they see, and very often a negative review, which prevents a purchase, will just see more upvotes.
mm-hmm.
And so you'll see a negative review from like 5 months ago compared to a totally glowing review from 1 month ago, and the 5 month old one is like four patches and features and everything behind. Um, the amount of things we've added in based on player feedback, they wanted full control of companion level up, so we added that. They wanted companions to be able to allow to do skill checks. So I've just put that in like last week and patched it live a few days ago. Updated it a few
Okay.
days ago. We added far more. Like they said that the origin stories were incredibly linear, which they were. So we totally opened up the early part of the game. They wanted more combat, so we added that. They wanted more depth to the companion, so that's an ongoing thing. But basically, I've like looked at the fair criticism, not the stuff which says like these philosophical quotes on the loading screen are trite
Cringe.
philosophy 101 things. Why don't they rather just have Kylie Minogue song lyrics in there? It's like, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? I think that was Rock Paper Shotgun or Eurogamer. I can't remember. That kind of stuff you just got to move past and go like, why are you taking such a cheap shot? You know, and rather look at like, so I want to build up this companion, and I don't understand why Cole, who is an engineer, he can't be used for tinkering and repair checks. That doesn't make sense. I'm like, okay, very fair point. Let's add the ability for companions to be factored in for certain skill checks where it makes sense. Um, I can't even remember all the features, but if you look back at our dev blogs, you'll see how much we've added and how much we've changed based upon player feedback more than media feedback, I'd say.
And I have seen those changes as well. I know in my own playthrough there were some things like even stuff you just mentioned that I've seen is like, oh yeah, that I'm so happy when games nowadays or RPGs, update to do something like that, or even
Mhm.
have started to update to do that. Having your character who's the best for the job doing the
Yeah,
job rather
yeah,
than putting it on the player character to basically be this very weird jack of all trades slash
yeah.
master of none type of
Mhm.
situation. And I appreciated that, and just like my own ability to just like see, oh, okay, yeah, the game is getting updated to where I think it would make sense to be, like with some more modern like quality of life features, which is really nice to
Totally.
see. And actually, speaking of these updates and stuff like that, I wanted to Talk about like now that you mentioned during the last question that you just let go of the last person from the team. So now it's you doing solo development, and so like, how do you stay motivated with that? Since now, like, as the team has kind of like shrunk, and
Yeah.
you're still adding in stuff. How do you stay motivated as a solo developer now? Well, actually, first, how did that happen over time? I think you've already answered, but how do you
Mhm.
stay motivated?
Sure. Look, it was devastating at the start, and it was like, okay, there are bugs we have to fix. That's just like this is a game breaker, or this is a complete progression blocker, or this makes the game literally unplayable beyond this point if you've done X, Y, and Z. That has to be fixed. And
Mm-hmm.
you got to turn the um I don't want to say negativity, that's too simplistic a term. But you got to take the criticism and the real issues and just be as objective as you can about it. And like, everyone who's on the team plays video games, or what was on the team at least. Even if RPGs were not their favorite genre, hey, we can share in that frustration. We got to fix this for the player. Like the players have very very valid points here. When I started Drop Bear Bytes, it was to start a business. It was to found this like a startup business and have Broken Roads as a product and build the business from there. It wasn't like
Mm-hmm.
I have this fantastic game idea and it's going to be the greatest RPG ever seen. And, it was like, no, we're running a business here, and I've taken the mentality the whole way through that, like, and I said in a similar interview, I think it was with Matt Barton, asked similar question, and I said something along the lines of like, hey, I'm running a restaurant here, and the customers are like, their lasagna's undercooked, or there's a worm in their salad, or whatever. Like, what are you gonna do? Cry about it? Oh no, I made a bad salad. Like, no, you apologize to the guest. You don't go tweet about it. Oh, these entitled restaurant goers that expect their lasagna perfect. It's like, screw that. You took $30, $40, $15, whatever the sale price was at the moment. You took that money from a consumer. They expected a certain something. They didn't get that certain something, so you owe it to them to be satisfied, or else you cannot complain about gamers want this or gamers are that. Like that's something that's a modern thing that is just I don't buy into it at all, and I can't believe the journalists and the developers who seem to loathe their own readers and clients and players. It's like, what a weird thing where your customer, you almost seem to despise your customer because they don't like your own creation in the way that you think that they should like it. So yeah, I mean, you obviously it hurts a lot, and there were some sleepless nights and some really down moments around launch, and then you got to pick yourself up and go, okay, cool, fight's not over. I've worked for 5 years to do this thing. I'm gonna keep going. And so yeah, to how you stay motivated, it's just like your mindset around it. And my mindset was like, Broken Roads at launched was so far from my vision. Um, and the fact that I'm able to keep working on it myself because we've got all the tools and I can do everything I need to in Unity, and most of it is in Odyssey, the narrative design tool, and so on. It's like the game's live. We still today, I've just checked before this call, we have more wish lists than most games will ever, and I'm talking by the highest kind of percentages most games will ever see in their entire life cycle. We have so many people. There's still Reddit threads. I've just seen like 3 videos about our Switch version recently, like praising it. Like people are still interested in this game, and a lot of people still want Broken Roads to be good.
Mm-hmm.
It's not bringing in any money to me personally because, of course, the publisher needs to make their recoup, which is totally standard in this industry. So I'm like doing other work, and most of the team have either found other jobs or were doing other contracting or whatever. And I'm still immensely proud of just having had an idea, built up a team, attracted the investment, got a publisher, got the cover of PC Gamer, got a whole load of interest, and shipped a title. So that to me is like, that is a success. I'm extremely proud of that. But I can see massive flaws in the quality of the product that's shipped. And I don't think that my consumers, my customers, my players are, um, whatever you want to call them, capital G gamers, and roll your eyes and whatever. It's like, no, these are the people that expect a certain something, and I want to satisfy that, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's motivating because I just refuse to be beaten. It's like, oh, I can see how I can improve that. I'm gonna just fucking do it. I'm just gonna do
Mm-hmm.
the work. I'm just gonna keep working and not cry about it on social media and not whatever. Like, you take your licks, and then you pick yourself up, and man, the Rocky quote, it's not how hard you can hit, but how hard you can get hit and keep fighting, or whatever that line is. That's the mindset I've had through all the challenges of broken roads.
Okay. You know, I I'm happy for you. I'm honestly happy
Thank
for you that you've made that you're taking it in stride. I can honestly, it's 2024 was a rough year for game development. I mean,
you.
like
Yes,
I watch Skill Up from time to time, and
yes,
last year every video of This Week in Games at least had one segment of and this company died too.
yes, yes.
So honestly, taking everything in of what you said, like the reviews, the this, very proud of you for how you've at
Thank you.
least, stood up for yourself well enough, despite, what could have been for most people been like, career ending or just like career transitioning worthy. Like, okay, this failed. I'm just gonna move on. So
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, look, it's
no,
had to be. We've had to find income elsewhere, and do contract work or do other work in our personal capacities and so on. So I wouldn't call it a labor of love. I still want the game to be profitable, and I still want the business to be, be able to see this game be what I envisioned for, like, 4.5 years, as opposed to the disappointment at launch. So, thanks. I really appreciate that, and I do want. Um, sorry, quick aside. We brought on two narrative consultants last year, George Zietz and Olga Moskvina. They provided over 400 pages of narrative feedback, and they didn't pull any punches. And I agree with so much of what they said, and I have still got hundreds of pages to go through to implement those changes. They are core RPG players and writers themselves. George worked on. If you haven't looked it up, I would recommend looking up their Moby games for their credits. Some of the most revered RPGs, CRPGs ever. And I think
hmm
until I have made this the mature, philosophical, deep game I always wanted it to be, and it certainly wasn't that at launch. Bugs aside, we have underdeveloped companions. We have moments where the player character is given no motivation to do what is requested of them. The stakes aren't high. Why would I be helping this miserable, um, rude, uncharismatic person to get the fetch quest done? Just some of it's just poorly implemented. Um, and cool, I accept that, and I'm basically not going to stop until there's some reason I can't work on this game any further, or until it's the game that I've always wanted it to be.
and that was actually going to be my next question. Is like in a perfect, it's kind of like a scenario question. Like
Hmm.
in a perfect scenario, 20, let's say you're back to 2020, okay, and
Yeah,
let's and the big panini never happened either. But you're 2020, you're a year into pre-development or into development.
yeah.
What would Broken Roads, like, for a perfect world, be coming out in 2024 still? Like, what would your perfect vision of the game kind of like be for yourself?
So are you asking about the launched product, or what would I have done differently during development?
More like what you would have done differently to ensure you had the perfect thing. No issues, no problems. Just what would you have done differently across that time?
I think I would have ensured that the writing in particular
Mm-hmm.
was always on track with the original vision, and I would have been a lot firmer when it came to um, basically forcing my vision to be upheld. I've worked in teams before where the entire project failed and everyone was fired basically before launch because of certain things that went wrong, because the director or the CEO did not listen to his experts. And I was very afraid of making the same mistake. Why hire people that have more experience and are better at this than you if you're not going to listen to them? What's the point in that?
Mm-hmm.
Um, I've since learned that that can be problematic too. If something is going against your gut, if something is going against your instinct, if you strongly disagree, but you go, okay, I don't think this is the necessarily the right course of action, but what kind of game director or studio founder am I if I'm just going to override the advice that I'm getting? I have some very, very particular moments through the development of this game where I have gone against my gut as a lifelong RPG player, a writer myself, and made decisions based upon the advice of others or the opinions of others that some of them almost verbatim in reviews or in criticism or whatever have been called out as shortcomings of the game. So I would
Mm-hmm.
have absolutely just gone far harder in if this game's going to fail, it's going to fail because of my mistakes. It's not going to fail because of your mistakes, if that makes sense. Like
It
I
it
would rather
definitely
carry a
does. Yeah.
yeah, cool. I'd rather carry the failure because if we go back to the restaurant and you saying, "Hey, we need to put like 100 tomatoes in the salad." I'm like, 100 tomatoes? That's ridiculous. Like, let's limit it to 10. And the person's like, "Hey, I am the salad maker. Why did you hire me as salad maker?" Okay, cool. Put 100 tomatoes. And then the game gets criticized, or at least the customer sends it back because it's far too many tomatoes. Like, I've had moments like that where I've just gone, man, I should have just been so much harsher in certain moments about going, that is not broken roads, or I'm sorry, that is just not what our customers are going to want. And being made to, let me rephrase that, allowing myself to doubt my experience and convictions regarding certain elements of design, narrative, technical decisions, and so on. There were many moments where things that were in my control, I did not do, I think, what I should have. Now, let's also zoom out a little bit. There is there is no question that the world, certain things about reality outside of my control, um, also affected the development, the timeline, all those kinds of things. A lot of this stuff is available if people want to Google and see, third parties related to broken roads. They can find publicly available information that I'm not going to go into further detail about that
Mm-hmm.
have a non-zero effect on a team's ability to deliver the best possible product. Those kinds of things I couldn't do anything about. What I could do about what was in my control and could have been done differently, um, we could have released a far better game despite certain external challenges. And those are the exact kind of things I'm going through now. Even if it means rewriting quite literally well over 100,000 words in the game based upon wanting it to be more mature, grittier, have the characters like be more like they exist in a post-apocalyptic world, as opposed to what some of the shipped or at least launch version of some of the quest moments and characters and stories are. That stuff's absolutely within our control.
Mm-hmm. Okay. and and fair and understood. I get it. Um, I understand where it's like you kind of sometimes when you get experts around you and you get like everyone around you in your ear telling you this, telling you that, giving you an opinion here, giving you an opinion there. It's sometimes you do have to kind of take a stand on what it is
Mhm.
that you believe in and just accept and it's easier, and I can understand that too, because it's easier to accept responsibility for it when it was something you wanted and it didn't
Yeah.
work, rather than it was something this person wanted and that person wanted, and then you're still taking or at least how it feels is like, I could have just let it be this, or I could have
Mm.
just let it be that, and now it
Yeah.
feels like you're almost taking the brunt of their decision making, which
Well,
is
I mean, look,
sometimes.
their decision making, I allowed it. And so the buck stops with me. I am responsible for every single bit of content and every decision and whatever. I was the founder, the game director, the, most
Hmm.
senior person in the studio. So I am absolutely not saying, oh, the game failed because of someone else. Like, no, the game
Yeah.
failed because of my decisions.
Hmm.
100% of the time on the way, along the way, if I had somebody in my studio doing something in the game that I wasn't aware of and only found out about after launch, I still enabled the circumstances which brought that about. You know what I mean? If I've had to edit something out or change it or completely rework something because of something that I learned 6 or 7 months after the game came out, I founded a remote studio and I set up pipelines and structures and review things and so forth as in internal reviews before stuff went public. And so if I didn't know that something was in the game, that's my responsibility. So I
Mm.
think that this kind of extreme ownership attitude is also part of what motivates me because it's my fault. You know what I mean? Like I
Hmm.
accept the responsibility for the state of the game, for 15 people having to lose their jobs, for the game not being a success. So yeah, man. Like, yes, there was a
Hmm.
lot of people and there are a lot of things, but I'm not going to, and I definitely don't want to be understood as me saying, oh, it was other people's fault. And if it had been my way, it could have been a success. Like, screw that. I'm the game director and I'm the last line, and it's my responsibility.
I get that. Yeah. Okay. Then, and that's good, and that's great. You know, that's great that you're taking that responsibility, and thank you for that, because it's easy to jump into the feelings and say, "Oh well, it was A, B, and C's fault, not mine."
Yeah.
So
No, it was
I
my fault. Yeah.
I have to ask, as far as like, where are we going from here with Broken Roads? So I saw, and I'll probably try to have it placed on screen around now.
Mhm.
We have a 2025, map that we're
Yeah.
going through. So, tell us more about that 2025 roadmap and where you want the game to really be at in by the end of this year.
Cool. So, perfect world, I would be able to, like, the ideal thing would have been, oh, I've managed to rework the entire game a year from launch, and like a month from now, mid-April 25 is the version of the game I wish we could have launched. Um, reality is not that nice to be able to go, oh, look, it's a year anniversary and it's now the best Broken Roads. I stated in the blog and on Discord and so on, like, hey, I'm just not going to give you all dates when you can expect this because I'm handling this myself. I could come into bugs that take 1 hour to fix or 3 days to fix. I don't know how long it's going to take to implement these things. Um, so at the end of this year, before the end of 2025, I want Broken Roads to be in its, like, basically its final form, as it were, where it's like, okay, the bugs are fixed, the most requested community features that make sense are in. The tone, the characters, the depth of the philosophy, the quality of the narrative, the uh, maturity and depth of development of the companion characters is where they should be. And Broken Roads is a cohesive whole, a mature post apocalyptic story with really deep themes, with the different settlements and the different scenarios basically playing out as philosophical thought experiments, asking questions about morality and ethics in a world that, okay, well, we don't just have the coercive power of the state enforcing laws, and that in itself is sufficient um, to get people to not commit certain acts. If we remove that, what are people willing to justify? And what is right and wrong under different circumstances? And a post-apocalyptic setting lets you do that better than most, basically. So that, I think, was always the major vision for Broken Roads that really underdelivered. And as a result, the moral compass is like, I don't know, thumb suck number, a quarter as utilized as I wish it was. And so in a perfect world, at the end of this year, you've got something that feels more like early Fallout, feels like Planescape Torment, has the depth and replayability and interesting characters of like a Pillars of Eternity or something like that. And it's a redemption story of like, this game sucked at launch, this game was broken at launch, but man, did the team work really hard and didn't give up on it. And now it's actually a good, replayable, deep, well-written, interesting CRPG. That is where I would like to be by the end of this year. Obviously, the Steam reviews going out of mixed into mostly positive, ideally into very positive or overwhelmingly positive. But the main thing is, like, at the moment, it's a failure, and I would like to see it a success. And the only way to see it a success is to improve the quality of the product itself. So that's it. I really hope it's done by the end of 2025.
Okay. I personally think that those goals seem normal. Like they don't seem like they're too lofty, which sounds like a goal that, you can definitely hit. Sometimes, we make goals that are a little too high flying for for our britches. But
Yeah,
honestly, those
yeah. Look,
goals, those
originally it was what I just said for the end of 25. My goal was for a month from now. I was like mid-April 25, a year after launch. I wanted to be the version I wanted. That's completely unrealistic with one person working on the game.
yeah. But I mean, hey, the game is getting updated, and that's what matters. I'm happy to hear that the game is still getting some up to date things and changing out like old systems as well.
Thanks.
Uh, no problem, no problem. So I hear that with the game's post release development, and so I wanted to ask, are there can what is it called? Are there any new things that we can look forward to in the immediate future for people who are, listening and maybe like looking up the game and saying like, I know you said no dates, but just like an immediate thing that like, oh yeah, like you can really look forward to this upcoming, like say
Sure.
soon, a little bit of a preview of what's to come.
Happy to. So last week I put out the last big requested feature. Now it's not balanced, and I'm sure that community, because we've got a closed beta for the Discord QA, and if anybody reading this or listening wants to be a beta tester, you can just mention it on our Discord. So we've got a small group of people who are playing the most advanced, or at least the most recent versions of the game. That feature was the party skills. I've also got another thing that just should have been in there since launch or from launch is, when you hold down tab or mouse over a container, it now tells you if you've looted it or if it's empty or whatever. Simple little features like that. And then a few crucial or critical bugs have all been fixed. So I've done a lot of like technical changes over the last 6 weeks. And now I need to get deep into the narrative changes that have been requested. If bugs get reported or something critical comes up, I will address them. But I'm not actually going to be doing too much more in the way of adding or changing features. I really want to get into, in particular, there are some Lake Deborah bugs. There's some lack of depth. I created Lake Deborah, with the team. We split out a whole bunch of different locations, characters, settlements, quests amongst the varying members of the team. Lake Deborah was meant to be the deepest, most philosophical of all of the areas, and obviously wasn't what I wanted it to be. So I'm going to be focusing on that now to kind of fix up some of the loose threads that people have reported. And then the other one that seems to have been getting a lot of feedback, even as recently as this month in our Discord, in Steam discussions and so forth, and also in the narrative consultants' feedback, is Southern Cross. That whole game, that whole area of the game has certain changes that I think are just critical to make the game more like Broken Roads that I envisioned. We have moments where the player is teleported, for want of a better term, where we've reached a point in the story, and then we don't have the gameplay to let the player freely reach the next thing that makes sense or that would follow on from this major change that's just happened. And so we teleport the player to a different city or something like that, directly into another conversation, to prevent the game from breaking along the way because we didn't have the resources or the time or the word count or whatever to enable the player to reach there themselves. I want to eliminate 100% of that happening in the game. I want let's say the player reaches a point of no return. If they're going to be teleported, let's teleport them outside the front of the town. Let's not teleport them 100 kilometers away to some other interior they've never visited, and it's an incredibly jarring experience and so on. So wherever that happens, I've eliminated a few of those. Wherever that happens in the game, and even if it involves days of testing and thousands of words of additional reactivity, which we simply could not afford because of the word count restrictions in the run-up to launch, I want to improve all of those. So as per the roadmap that's on our dev blog, Lake Deborah, and Southern Cross, and then the other siders, which are the refugees outside of Meriden, if you're familiar with the game, and the indentured servants. I want to expand on those in a massive way. The amount of questions and interesting thought experiments one can have regarding human need in a time of shortage, where giving relieving suffering in the short term results in either like greater suffering or complete obliteration of an entire group of people. Those are extremely interesting questions and extremely difficult things to tackle with. And these came out of simply being interesting questions during the development of the game 4 or 5 years ago, that now have far more real world. If you look at like European politics and you look at refugee crises all over the world, it wasn't real world inspiration that had us include them in the game, but they now have even more kind of significance given the number of
Refugee
immigration,
crises.
exactly, the number of immigration refugee crises going on in the world. It's something that's kind of looked at. We ask a few questions, and then it's never resolved in Broken Roads. So I'm kind of handling it in how important is this to the player, and how significant and unsatisfying is the current experience. And those are kind of top of the list right now. And then after that, I will probably move on to the end game. So Kalgoorlie, which is the final place that you sort of gain entrance to, is based upon a skewed reading of Plato's Republic, and with all of its failings and so on, and sort of not having that Socratic counter to basically say, well, what's wrong with this, or what's wrong with that, or how could that go? Where are the flaws? What could human nature do? Like, what would people do given human nature that prevents this from being some kind of utopian society? And Kalgoorlie is meant to represent all of that. But again, all the constraints we've had and various issues that we've faced have meant that it's just a little abrupt. It doesn't answer those questions deeply enough. One of the companion characters, without going too much into spoilers, originally comes from Kalgoorlie, and yet that's barely touched. As in, the depth that you could explore why this person left, how he had to like leave his family, all those kinds of questions they're just missing. So I want to do all of that and do it well over the course of the next 6 to 9 months, let's say. I'm also working in English only on the PC versions. We will only do localization once I consider the game to be complete. Probably going to look for community localization support and translators and QA and so forth when the time is right. But for now, people should play the English only branch on Steam, which is an option from the main menu. And then on GOG and Epic, I'll just be putting up updates that include all of these English changes I'm talking about. But it could be a very long time, unfortunately, before console players get all of these improvements.
I understand. Well, that's it is what it is, you know, with
Yeah, yeah.
the solo diving. So it's understandable. Hopefully, you know, with with the changes and everything, and maybe like with a few interviews like this, and I'll see if we can maybe get a review up on RPGamer soon enough. Then maybe we can, you know, help turn the tide on the game and help get
That
things, you know, re-going again. So we can
that
get
really would
things.
be fantastic. Like what I hope to do is relaunch the game. Like go to all these
Hmm.
outlets and say, here is a line by line or paragraph by paragraph breakdown of your 4 out of 10 review. I've addressed this. This is no longer an issue. You wanted this feature. This is now done. You said the game sucks because this quest line doesn't resolve. It's now resolved. Like, would you consider re-reviewing whatever? I'm not going to call it the director's cut, but let's just use that for this conversation. Would you consider reviewing the director's cut edition as a separate review because the game is so different to what was reviewed at launch? I think that's going to be the only way, because a lot of people just go to Metacritic and they'll see a 6 out of 10 or 6.5, wherever we are right now in Metacritic, and move on from there, or Google it and see 4 out of 10 from IGN and forget about this game and never give it a chance. So yeah, thank you. I do hope we can get a review when the game is a little bit more further along, or if you want to, review it in its current state. But yeah, I'm definitely going to put some serious PR effort into trying to relaunch this game at some point in future.
Okay. All right. That's wonderful. All right. So I think we've kind of talked about it. Just a few because Broken Roads. I wanted to get some information. Wanted to put out there that Broken Roads will be having it'll be a part of the Steam sale that's coming up in a few weeks, right? For the
I think a
spring
few
sale.
days actually. I
Hmm.
think I don't have I think it's the 13th, but I don't have it open in front of me. But I think it's literally a few days away.
Oh.
You can go to like SteamDB and it lists the timing of all the sales. I do think it's this coming week.
Okay. Great. So hopefully, oh yeah, it's on the 13th in like 3 days. I just looked it up. All right then.
Yep.
So will be people who are listening. You know, if I can get this up soon enough, hopefully You know, it'll be about going for what 50% off.
50% off. And it's
And
currently
so
60% off on the Switch, I think, for another 9 days, and 50% off on Steam, starting on the 13th.
that was the other thing was I wanted to know where else can people purchase. I understand console players might not be able to get the updates till later, but if people still want to purchase to support and everything else,
Sure.
like where can people find Broken Roads?
Well, to be clear, the console versions have received massive updates and numerous big patches since launch. So it's not like the console versions are stuck at the launch versions. The consoles are at late 2024 versions. It is
Oh,
on
okay.
you know PSN for both PlayStation 4 and PlayStation 5. It's Xbox One and Series X on the Microsoft Store, and the Nintendo eShop. On PC, it's on GOG and Steam and Epic, but then it sometimes will go for sale on, I think, Green Man Gaming and many of the resellers as well. So if people have like subscriptions or deals with those, they can sometimes get it a little bit cheaper than it might be on Steam or GOG at the time. Basically everywhere except mobile. It's also available on cloud from GeForce Now and I think a couple of other providers. We're also fully playable on Steam Deck.
You
The
are.
status is playable, yeah, and have been since launch. It took about 9 months or something to get the playable status. Um, just officially get it, and I'm like two changes away in terms of like font sizes and console glyphs, which is like press the R, press the shoulder button, press the A button. Those images that display those are apparently like a couple of pixels too small. Feedback from Valve is very, very specific on what you need to do to get verified on Steam Deck. So that's one of the changes that I actually have lined up for this week. I don't know how fast they'll review it, but I'm hoping to be Steam Deck verified for the spring sale. So yeah, we don't have a dedicated Linux version, but I've played through the whole thing, as have other players, and it fully works with Proton or Wine if for Linux or Steam Deck players.
Okay, great. All right then. So I think that's it for my questions for you. Craig, is there anything else that you had that you wanted to say about the game um or anything else about like, maybe just like the story of it or anything else that you wanted to add in?
Uh, Honestly, for now, it's just like it's so encouraging to see people post entire Reddit threads about how I'm continuing going, or that so many people still believe in it, that there is still journalist interest. People like you reaching out to me and wanting to do pieces about this is awesome. And yeah, I just don't want people to give up on the game. I have not, and I hope that the many people sort of waiting for a better version, I'll be able to satisfy that sometime soon.
All right then. All right. Well, thank you for joining me today, Craig, and on this interview, telling us the ups and the downs, the highs, the lows, and honestly, I hope Broken Roads, like it. I hope it just keeps getting better and better and keeps moving up.
Cool. No, well, thank you very much, and yeah, again, thanks for the interest. It's super encouraging that 11 months on after a failed launch, we're still getting interest about it. So thank you.
Hey, no problem. All right.